The blood-red moon hung low in the sky, casting its eerie light over the small village at the edge of the forest. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the stillness of night. In a modest cottage at the village's edge, a child cried. Her mother's hands trembled as she held her newborn, eyes wide with fear. "They say she is cursed," whispered her father, voice rough with anger and worry. "The midwife warned us. The signs are clear. That child will bring nothing but ruin." The mother shook her head, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I cannot leave her," she said softly, voice breaking. But her husband's hands gripped her shoulders tightly. "No. If we keep her, we risk everything. Our farm, our lives, even the king's wrath. She is not meant for this world." By morning, the decision had been made. They wrapped the girl in a simple cloth. Her tiny fingers curled as though reaching for safety, and carried her into the forest. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. There was no name spoken, no last embrace, only the cold whisper of betrayal. They left her among the roots and fallen leaves, convinced that nature or fate would claim her. But Alara did not die, not immediately. The forest had its own rules, and some said it protected those who had the courage to survive. She lay among the moss and stones, shivering as the wind whispered through the trees. Hunger gnawed at her tiny stomach, and the cries of distant creatures echoed in the darkness. Her skin was pale, her lips blue, but something inside her would not surrender. The first wolf came silently, its amber eyes reflecting the red moonlight. Its growl was low, almost a warning. Alara, though trembling, did not scream. She remembered a voice, distant and faint, telling her that fear could be controlled, that it could even become strength. As the wolf approached, she raised a trembling hand, and instinctively, shadows from the forest seemed to twist around her, flickering like smoke. The wolf stopped, sensing something beyond flesh and blood. And then, as if understanding, it turned away. From that night on, Alara learned the ways of the forest. She moved with silence, listened to the language of the wind and the rustle of leaves, and slept beneath the canopy of trees. Each day, her body grew stronger, her mind sharper. Yet even as she learned to survive, loneliness pressed upon her like a heavy stone. She had no name, no family, no one to call her own. Only the whispers of the forest kept her company, and sometimes she imagined faces in the shadows, watchful eyes that neither threatened nor comforted. Years passed. Her hair grew long and dark, her eyes reflecting the mystery of the forest itself. She learned to speak the language of the birds, to understand the warnings of the deer, and even the cunning of the foxes. The villagers who had abandoned her thought her gone forever, a memory swallowed by time. But in the heart of the forest, she was alive, and she was learning more than survival. One evening, while gathering herbs near a hidden stream, Alara sensed a presence unlike any other. It was not the cautious watchfulness of the animals, nor the subtle magic of the trees. It was deliberate, powerful, commanding. She turned, and through the mist, she saw a figure standing tall, cloaked in shadows. His eyes shone with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat, not from fear, but from recognition of something she could not name. "You are the one they left behind," the voice said, deep and steady, carrying authority yet curiosity. "The one the village calls cursed. Troop." Alara's hand went instinctively to her chest, her heart hammering. Who are you?" she asked, her voice small but defiant. "I am Kalen," he said, "Prince of the Alpha Throne, and I claim you as mine." The words echoed through the forest like thunder. Alara's first thought was anger. How dare he speak as if she belonged to anyone? Yet beneath her anger, a flicker of something else stirred curiosity, a strange recognition. a pull she could not name. She wanted to run, but her legs, though strong from years of survival, seemed to hesitate. Kalen stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet oddly protective. "You have strength," he said. "Strength that could rival kings, even creatures older than our forests. But strength alone is not enough. You need guidance and protection." Elara shook her head. "I do not need anyone. I survive on my own. I have always survived." Kalen's eyes softened slightly, though his posture remained regal and commanding. "Survival is not enough," he said. "This world is changing. Darkness stirs beyond these trees. And one day, your strength will be tested in ways the forest cannot prepare you for. You will need more than instinct. You will need me, or you will fall." The girl's gaze dropped to the earth, conflicted. She did not trust easily. Betrayal had been her first teacher. And yet, there was a fire in her chest, a recognition that perhaps this stranger was not an enemy. She felt the weight of his gaze, strong and unyielding, and for the first time in her life, she wondered if she was meant for something beyond survival. "You cannot claim me," she whispered finally, more to herself than to him. Kalen knelt slightly, lowering himself to her level, and his voice became quieter, more intimate. "I do not ask for permission, but I am not your enemy. I see what they could not see. I see you. Coming describe. I takes decide. I do not ma." The words lingered in the mist, more powerful than any spell. Elara's mind raced with questions. Who was this prince? And why did he seek her? What did it mean to be claimed as his mate? And most unsettling of all, why did a part of her long for him to stay, to watch over her, even as every instinct told her to run? Days turned into nights as Kalen remained nearby. Not pressing, but observing. He taught her to move with more purpose, to harness the small powers she had learned from the forest, and to see the world as it truly was, a place of danger, beauty, and magic intertwined. She discovered that his presence, though commanding, was a strange comfort, a warmth against the cold emptiness that had haunted her since birth. Yet every time she allowed herself a flicker of trust, her mind returned to the memory of her parents' betrayal, and a wall rose within her, tall and unyielding. She could not forget the coldness in their eyes, the way they had left her to die. And now, even with Kalen, she wondered if this was another kind of trap, another way to take from her what little control she had over her life. One night, under the blood-red moon that marked her birth, Kalen finally spoke of the danger she had been born into. "The curse they feared is not just a story," he said, voice heavy with gravity. "It is a force older than our kingdom, a shadow that seeks to claim you. They abandoned you because they did not understand, because they feared the inevitable. But I will stand with you. I will claim you, not as a possession, but as a partner." Elara looked at him, heart pounding. Acceptance was a word she had never known. She had learned to live with fear, to live with solitude, to trust only herself. But the idea of standing with someone, of having a bond that could turn fear into strength, stirred something deep within her. Before she could answer, a sound shattered the stillness. A howl, louder and closer than any she had heard before. The shadows of the forest seemed to shift and twist, reaching toward her like dark fingers. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but Kalen's hand found hers, firm and steady. "You are not alone," he said. "Not now. Not ever." As the shadows surged and the howl grew closer, Elara realized that her life had changed forever. The forest, the curse, the loneliness, all of it had led to this moment. She would face the unknown, and she would not face it alone. For the first time, the abandoned girl felt a spark of hope. And yet, the danger that approached reminded her that survival alone was no longer enough. Hook, ending. A massive shadow leapt from the trees, larger than any wolf or bear she had ever seen, eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Kalen tightened his grip on her hand, and Alara's breath caught in her throat. The forest had secrets deeper than she imagined, and the first true test of her strength was about to begin. The shadow in the forest was gone, swallowed by the mist, but its threat lingered like a cold whisper on the wind. Alara's heart still raced as she clutched Kalen's hand, her small fingers trembling. The prince's presence was steady, unyielding a rock in the storm of fear, but she felt the weight of her own uncertainty pressing against her chest. "You survived," Kalen said softly, releasing her hand only to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Not many could. Your strength, it is rare." Alara swallowed, her voice small but defiant. "I've always survived. Alone." Kalen's gaze softened, but there was no doubt, no compromise in his tone. "Alone will not be enough this time. The curse you bear, it will demand more than your instincts, and enemies, both seen and hidden, will come for you." The words sent a chill through her, but there was also a strange thrill. For the first time, someone spoke of her not as weak or doomed, but as powerful. She had spent years hiding in the forest, avoiding both humans and animals that might harm her. To hear someone recognize her strength was frightening and intoxicating. They walked through the misty forest toward the edge of Kalen's domain, where the trees thinned, revealing the high walls of his castle. Even from a distance, it was imposing. Stone towers that seemed to scrape the sky, battlements that held guards in constant watch, and banners that rippled in the cold wind. This was a world far beyond anything Alara had ever known. Yet the pull of destiny seemed to draw her forward. Inside the castle, everything was new and overwhelming. The air smelled of burning torches and aged wood. The halls echoed with footsteps and whispers, and she noticed the cautious glances of servants and guards as they passed. It was a world of rules and expectations, of power and hierarchy, so unlike the freedom of the forest that had been her home. Kalen led her to a chamber at the highest tower, a room of stone and warmth where the red sun of evening spilled across the floor. "This will be your sanctuary," he said. "Safe, for now. You will need rest, and you will need to prepare for what is coming." Alara looked around, her eyes wide. The room was simple, yet elegant, functional, for a prince, and yet filled with subtle comforts. She felt a pang of guilt, thinking of the small, cold forest floor she had called home for so many years. But she also felt a flicker of curiosity, a desire to see what this new world held for her. "I do not know if I want this," she admitted, voice trembling slightly. "I am not like you. I am not someone of importance." Kalen stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Importance is not given by birth alone. It is shaped by courage, by choices, by the strength to face what others cannot. You have survived because you are stronger than anyone imagines." Over the next days, Alara learned the first lessons of life at the Alpha Throne. Kalen taught her to move through the castle not as a frightened girl, and why, but as someone who could command presence. She learned the language of diplomacy, how tone and posture could wield influence, and began to understand the subtle dangers hidden behind polite smiles. Yet for all the lessons, the tension between them remained. Every touch, every glance, carried the weight of something unspoken. Kalen did not force himself upon her. He guided, corrected, and challenged. And in each interaction, Alara felt both fear and fascination. She resisted, at first, but a part of her, the part that had longed for recognition. But danger did not wait for permission. One evening, as a crimson sun sank behind the mountains, a messenger arrived, breathless and frantic. "Your Highness," he stammered. "The northern lords, they mock your claim. They say the cursed girl is a threat, and some speak of attacking the castle to remove her before she harms us all. Elara felt her stomach tighten. Even here, far from the forest, the shadows of fear and judgment followed her. Kalen's jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with the familiar storm of a ruler who had faced countless threats. They do not understand, he said quietly, voice low but full of authority. And they will learn, one way or another. Elara's hands clenched into fists. For so long, people had judged her, abandoned her, feared her without reason. And now, even as she stood in a castle of stone and fire, she felt the sting of the same fear. But Kalen's presence reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. She was not alone anymore. Them, too. And night fell. And with it came the first real test of her courage. Kalen led her to the castle battlements, where the wind cut like a knife, and the distant mountains were shrouded in shadow. Tonight, he said, we see who walks in darkness and who hides in it. You must face this without fear. Elara's heart pounded as she followed him. Below, the castle courtyard was empty, silent, but she sensed the tension in the air. It was not just the threat of rebellion. It was the presence of something older, something drawn to her power, something that waited in silence. Suddenly, a dark figure moved among the shadows, agile and swift. Elara felt the pull of instinct, the familiar rush of adrenaline that had kept her alive in the forest. But she was not alone. Kalen was beside her, guiding, supporting, lending strength without taking control. Focus, he whispered, eyes locked on hers. Do not run. Do not fight blindly. Use what you know. Trust yourself. And me. Breathing deeply, Elara let the lessons of the forest and the guidance of the prince merge. Shadows seemed to bend and twist at her command, forming a barrier between her and the intruder. The figure faltered, then vanished into the darkness, leaving behind only the echo of its footsteps. Kalen lowered a hand to rest against her cheek, and for a moment, the tension melted into something quieter, almost tender. You did well, he said softly. Your strength. It is not just in your hands or your body. It is in your heart, your mind. That is why I claimed you. Elara's eyes met his, wide and unsure. Claimed me, she repeated, the words strange and heavy on her tongue. I do not know if I understand what that means. Kalen's gaze softened, though it remained strong and unwavering. It means you are not alone. It means you are part of something larger than yourself. It means that whatever darkness comes, we face it together. In the days that followed, Elara trained under Kalen's guidance. She learned to channel her powers, to harness the shadows that had protected her in the forest and mold them into tools, into defense, into subtle offense. She discovered that strength was not just physical, it was mental, emotional, and spiritual. And slowly, she began to see herself not as the cursed girl her parents had abandoned, but as someone capable of shaping her own fate. Yet the more she learned, the more the tension between her and Kalen grew. Their interactions were no longer simply teacher and student. Every glance, every brush of a hand, carried unspoken emotion. She wanted to resist, to hold on to the independence that had been her only ally for years. But she also wanted to lean in, to trust, to be seen for who she truly was. The night of the blood-red moon approached again, the anniversary of her birth, and the mark of the curse she had carried all her life. Kalen brought her to the highest tower once more, and together they watched the moon rise. Its light washed over the castle walls and the distant forest, casting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. Tomorrow, Kalen said quietly, we face what has been waiting for you since birth. The curse is not gone. It has only been sleeping. You are stronger now, but you must choose how to meet it, with fear or with courage. Elara swallowed, her mind racing. She thought of the forest, of the wolves, of the nights alone, with only whispers for company. She thought of Kalen, of the strength in his eyes, the steadiness in his voice. She realized that the life she had known, the life of survival, of running, of hiding, was ending. And yet, for the first time, she did not feel fear. Hook, ending. As the moon rose high, casting red light over the kingdom, a chilling wind swept through the towers. From the shadows below, a figure emerged more powerful than any she had faced. A being drawn to her curse, to her power. Ilara felt the pull of destiny tighten around her chest, and Kalen's hand found hers again. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and there was no turning back. The blood-red moon hung heavy in the night sky, its light spilling across the castle walls like liquid fire. Ilara stood at the edge of the highest tower, her heart pounding with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. Tonight was the night the curse she had carried her entire life would awaken fully. She could feel it stirring within her, a restless shadow coiling in her chest, whispering promises of power and destruction. Kalen stood beside her, silent and steady, his dark eyes fixed on her face. The air between them was electric, charged with unspoken words and the weight of what was to come. For years, he had been her guide, her protector, and something more, though neither of them had dared to name it. Tonight, that tension, that unspoken bond, would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. "You are ready," Kalen said softly, though his tone carried the weight of command. "The curse will not wait for hesitation. You must face it, or it will consume you." Ilara swallowed hard. "And if I fail?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Then I will face it with you," he replied, placing a firm hand over hers. "You are not alone." Rude. The words were simple, but they carried a promise that reached deeper than any blade, stronger than any shield. Ilara drew in a deep breath, closing her eyes to feel the shadows within her stir. She could sense the forest of her childhood, the wild creatures that had taught her to survive, and the lessons that had shaped her. And she could sense Kalen, the prince whose strength was unlike anything she had ever known, standing beside her as an anchor in the storm of fear. The first wave of the curse hit like a chill wind from the abyss. Shadows rose from the ground, curling around her feet, twisting and writhing as if alive. The walls of the castle seemed to breathe, the torches flickering as though caught in some unseen tempest. Ilara's heart raced, but she did not retreat. Instead, she focused on the center of her being, on the strength that had carried her through years of abandonment and solitude. "You are stronger than this," Kalen murmured. "Believe it, trust yourself." Ilara reached out, letting her awareness extend into the shadows, touching them, bending them, learning their rhythm. Slowly, the chaos around her began to respond. The shadows obeyed, forming barriers, shields, and pulses of energy that radiated from her. She felt a thrill of power, but also a warning this force was not merely protective. It could destroy, if left unchecked. From the darkness, a voice echoed, cold and ancient. "You cannot control what is not yours." Ilara's eyes snapped open. The voice was not human. It was older, wiser, and darker than anything she had faced. It seemed to reach inside her mind, probing for fear, doubt, and weakness. "I am not afraid," she whispered, though a tremor ran through her body. "I will not be controlled. I will master this." Kalen stepped closer, his presence grounding her. "You are not alone in this," he said firmly. "Together, we will face it." The shadows surged again, more violently this time. Shapes formed creatures of darkness that seemed born from nightmare, with eyes that glowed like molten fire. They circled her, testing her, daring her to falter. Alara's hands moved instinctively, shaping the shadows into walls of protection, weaving them into patterns that felt both familiar and terrifying. The struggle was exhausting. Her body shook, her mind strained under the weight of power she barely understood. And yet, she did not give in. She could feel Kaelin's strength beside her, a steady current of reassurance that allowed her to push further, to reach deeper into the darkness within herself. "You are doing it," he said, his voice low but proud. "Do not stop. You are stronger than you know." Slowly, the creatures faltered. The shadows obeyed her will, bending and coiling around her, forming a protective barrier that even the darkness could not penetrate. Alara felt a rush of triumph, but it was tempered by exhaustion and the realization that the curse was not yet finished. "Enough!" the ancient voice hissed, and the shadows recoiled. "You have power, but at a cost. You cannot hide from what is coming." Alara's chest heaved. "Then I will not hide," she said, her voice stronger now, filled with determination. "I will face it, and I will survive." Kaelin reached for her hand, pulling her close. "You are not alone," he repeated. But this time, there was a note of something deeper, something that went beyond words. His gaze held hers, intense and unyielding, and for a moment, the shadows and the curse seemed to recede, leaving only the two of them, bound by trust and unspoken connection. In the days that followed, Alara continued to learn, to master the shadows that had been both a curse and a gift. But the awakening had changed something in her. She could feel the pull of the outside world, the whispers of nobles who resented her presence, and the rumblings of forces older than the kingdom itself. The forest of her past seemed distant now, replaced by the intricate web of power and intrigue within the castle walls. Kaelin remained at her side, but their bond was tested in new ways. The tension between them was electric. Every glance, every touch, every word carried weight. Alara found herself both resisting and drawn to him, uncertain whether it was fear, admiration, or something deeper that stirred in her heart. Kaelin, for his part, was patient yet unyielding, challenging her at every turn, guiding her without taking control, letting her grow into the power she had always been destined to wield. One evening, as the crimson moon rose again, a messenger arrived from the northern lords. Their message was clear. They would not accept a cursed girl in the prince's court. Some whispered of rebellion, others of assassination. Alara's pulse quickened. She had faced danger in the forest, but the world outside the castle was different. It was not only the supernatural she had to fear, it was humans, politics, and the fragile threads of loyalty and envy that wove through the kingdom. Kaelin's eyes darkened as he read the message. "They underestimate her," he said quietly, but there was a storm in his gaze. "And they underestimate us." Alara nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Then we will show them," she said, her voice steady. "Not with fear, but with strength. Not with submission, but with courage." The prince smiled faintly, pride and something softer shining in his eyes. "That is why I claimed you," he said, "because you are more than they can imagine. Because you are not afraid to face what they cannot even see." Days turned into nights as Alara trained and learned, mastering the delicate balance between her innate power and the discipline Kaelin instilled. She began to understand that her curse was not merely a burden, it was a gift, a force that could protect, influence, and even inspire. But with each lesson, the stakes grew higher, the shadows more insistent, and the whispers of rebellion louder. And through it all, Kaelin remained beside her, both anchor and challenge. Their connection deepened, unspoken emotions simmering beneath every interaction. Alara began to understand that trust, courage, and love were not weaknesses, they were strength. And yet, the thought of relying on anyone, even him, frightened her. She had survived alone for so long, and the idea of giving part of herself to someone else was both terrifying and irresistible. Then came the night that changed everything. The northern lords had gathered near the castle gates, a force of hundreds, their intent clear: remove the cursed girl, or destroy the prince's claim. The castle walls shook under the threat, and the shadows within Alara stirred, as if aware of the approaching danger. Kaelin stood beside her on the battlements, his presence steady and commanding. "This is the moment," he said. "Show them what it means to face the Alpha Prince and his mate." Alara drew a deep breath, feeling the shadows coil around her like loyal guardians. She stepped forward, letting the power she had learned to control flow through her, shaping the darkness into protective forms, ready to confront the intruders. Her heart pounded, but fear no longer controlled her. For the first time, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. She was ready to fight not just for herself, but for Kaelin, for the kingdom, and for the destiny that had chosen her long before she could understand it. Hook. Ending. As the northern lords advanced, the shadows around Alara surged to life, twisting into forms that seemed almost alive. Kaelin's hand found hers once more, and their eyes met, the weight of unspoken promises and deep connection passing between them. The first battle had begun not only against men, but against the darkness within and around her. And in the shadows, something ancient watched, waiting and smiling at the challenge she had finally embraced. The dawn broke slowly over the kingdom, spilling gold and crimson across the castle walls. The night had been long, filled with shadows that whispered threats, and a battle that tested every ounce of strength Alara had learned. The northern lords had come with intent to destroy her, to prove that a cursed girl had no place in the prince's court. But they had underestimated her, and they had underestimated Kaelin. Alara stood at the battlements, the first rays of sunlight catching in her hair. Her body ached, her arms trembled, but her eyes burned with determination. The shadows that had followed her since childhood moved around her now with precision, responding to her will, a dance of power and control she had finally mastered. No longer was she the abandoned girl of the forest. She was a force in her own right, tempered by experience, courage, and guidance. Kaelin stepped beside her, his dark cloak flaring in the morning breeze. His expression was unreadable at first, but as his eyes met hers, there was pride and something else, something deeper, warmer. "You have grown beyond what I imagined," he said quietly. "Stronger than anyone, even I, could have hoped." Alara allowed herself a small smile, though fatigue tugged at her limbs. "I could not have done it without you," she admitted. "You did not command me. You showed me how to command myself." Kaelin's gaze softened. "And that is why you are mine, not because I claimed you, but because I chose you." For a moment, the weight of years of fear, abandonment, and loneliness fell from her shoulders. She had spent her life surviving, hiding, fearing the world and those who should have loved her. And now, standing beside Kaelin, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Her heart, long armored against betrayal, opened just enough to trust, just enough to hope. Below the battlements, the remnants of the northern lord's force had retreated, broken not only by the skill of the castle guards, but by the presence of Alara herself. The shadows she wielded had disarmed, deterred, and protected without spilling unnecessary blood. She realized then that her curse was not merely destruction, it was balance, a power meant to protect as well as command respect. But the night's trials had awakened something deeper within her. A faint pulse of ancient magic lingered in the air, a reminder that the darkness she had carried was older than any castle, any crown, any mortal fear. Alara's heart thudded with awareness. But she no longer felt terror. She had faced the shadows within herself and emerged stronger, guided by Kaelin and the lessons of both forest and court. "You are ready for the world now," Kaelin said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. But there is one final truth you must understand. The curse you carry is not a punishment. It is a legacy, and it is yours to command. Elara looked out over the horizon, her thoughts turning inward. She had spent years believing herself weak, dangerous, and unwanted. Her parents' betrayal had carved a void in her heart that no solitude could fill. But now, she understood that strength was not just survival. It was the courage to embrace her power, to trust another, and to shape her own destiny. She turned to Kaelin, eyes bright with resolve. Then I will command it. Not for fear, not for revenge, but for protection for this kingdom, and for us. Kaelin's lips curved in a faint smile, and he took her hand in his. Then, let us face whatever comes next. Together. The first test of that partnership came swiftly. A deep rumble shook the castle, and from the valley below rose a figure wreathed in darkness. It was taller than any man, with eyes like molten silver and a presence that made the air itself shiver. This was no ordinary threat, it was the force that had lingered in the shadows of her childhood, drawn to her power, waiting for the moment she embraced it. Elara did not falter. She stepped forward, feeling the pulse of the curse within her, the control she had earned through months of training and struggle. Shadows coiled around her like loyal guardians, forming walls of protection and blades of energy that hummed with intent. Kaelin moved to stand behind her, his hand steady on her shoulder, a silent promise of support. You cannot take what is not yours, the figure hissed, voice echoing with ancient malice. You were abandoned. You were never meant to claim power. Elara's heart steadied. I was abandoned. Yes, but I survived. I learned. And I am not alone. With a gesture, she sent the shadows forward, not to destroy, but to challenge and contain. The figure lunged, striking with immense force, yet Elara's control was precise. Every movement was deliberate, every reaction calculated. The darkness around her bent and shifted, forming barriers and counterattacks that forced the ancient being to retreat. Step by step, Kaelin's voice was a calm anchor amidst the chaos. Trust yourself, he said. Trust us. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of shadows, energy, and instinct. Elara felt exhaustion clawing at her, yet she drew deeper, reaching into the lessons of the forest, the strength of the castle, and the bond she shared with Kaelin. Finally, with a surge of power that radiated from her very core, the figure faltered, overwhelmed not by violence, but by the unity of control, courage, and trust. The shadow dissolved, leaving only silence and the faint hum of residual magic. Elara collapsed to her knees, breath heaving. But Kaelin caught her, holding her steady. You did it, he whispered. You faced the darkness and did not break. You are no longer the cursed girl abandoned in the forest. You are Elara, mate of the Alpha Prince, protector of the kingdom, and master of your own fate. Tears blurred her vision. But she smiled. For the first time, the weight of her past seemed lighter, transformed by the power she now embraced and the bond she had forged. She had not only survived, she had grown, claimed her place, and learned that love and trust were not weaknesses, but sources of true strength. In the following days, the kingdom itself began to recognize her presence. Nobles who had mocked her now whispered in awe of the girl who commanded shadows and stood beside the prince. The northern lords who had plotted against her were either subdued or reconciled, unable to deny the combined power of Elara and Kaelin. Even the forest seemed to welcome her, as if acknowledging that the girl who had once been abandoned had returned stronger than ever. Kaelin remained close, but now there was no longer tension between claim and resistance. Their bond had been tested, tempered, and solidified. Trust and admiration had grown into something deeper, a connection that was unspoken but undeniable. Elara realized that love, like power, required courage, the courage to let someone in, to stand together, and to face the world side by side. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of amber and violet, Ilara and Kaelin stood on the balcony of the highest tower. The castle lay silent beneath them, the kingdom safe. For now. And the curse she had once feared, now a tool she had mastered. Kaelin turned to her, his eyes soft yet intense. "You have changed everything," he said. "Not just for yourself, but for the kingdom, for me, for all of us." Ilara reached for his hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness that had become her anchor. "You showed me that strength is not just survival, but trust, courage, and connection. I was alone for so long, but not anymore." A gentle breeze swept through the towers, carrying the sense of forest and flame, of earth and magic. It was a reminder that the world was wide, full of dangers and wonders alike. And yet, for the first time, Ilara did not feel fear. She felt readiness, purpose, and a quiet joy. She had faced the curse, the shadows, and the world, and she had emerged stronger, not just in power, but in heart. Kaelin drew her close, and for a moment, the kingdom, the shadows, the trials, all of it fell away. There was only them, standing together, bound by choice, by trust, and by the bond of mate and partner. Hook. Ending. As the moon rose once more, blood-red and beautiful, Ilara looked out over the kingdom with Kaelin at her side. The whispers of ancient magic still lingered in the air, and threats yet unknown waited in shadowed corners. But she no longer feared them. Turning to Kaelin, she whispered, "What now, my alpha?" Kaelin smiled, shadows and sunlight mixing across his face. "Now, we shape our own destiny," he replied. And together, they stepped into the future stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the world would send.